He paid a fortune for the Apache woman everyone believed he had just bought. Then he tore the ownership paper into pieces in front of the entire town. As every hand moved toward a gun, the young woman had to make one impossible choice: follow a complete stranger, or risk everything by staying behind. What happened next changed both of their lives forever. Watch the full story, and don't forget to subscribe to our page for more unforgettable Wild West stories. Before we start the story, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is right now? Whew, the cold morning air covered the small town of Cinder Creek. Men gathered behind the general store where an old wooden platform stood in the middle of a crowded auction yard. Boots crushed the dry dirt beneath them, while loud voices filled the air. Some men laughed, others argued over prices. To them, it was just another business day. But for the young Apache woman standing on the platform, it was the worst day of her life. Her wrists were red from the ropes that had tied them all night. Dust covered her face, and the side of her buckskin dress had been torn during the struggle when she was captured. A single feather rested against one long black braid. She kept her back straight and her chin high. She refused to lower her eyes. Her name was known only to her. The men around her did not care who she was. They only saw someone they could own. The auctioneer smiled as if he were selling cattle instead of a human life. "Strong, healthy, knows how to ride," he shouted. The crowd laughed. The young woman remained silent. Inside, fear sat heavily in her chest, but she refused to let anyone see it. She watched every face carefully, searching for one person who looked different from the rest. At the other end of town, Jeremiah Stone tied his horse outside the mercantile. He had come only to buy salt, fence wire, nails, and a few supplies before winter became harder. He planned to speak with Sheriff Silas about strange riders near his ranch, and then return home before sunset. That had been his plan. Then he heard the auctioneer's voice. Something inside him tightened. He slowly walked toward the crowd. The moment he saw the woman standing alone on the platform, old memories returned like cold wind. He remembered helpless faces. He remembered losing people. He remembered the day he failed to save his younger brother. The scar on his leg ached beneath his trousers, just as it always did when painful memories returned. Jeremiah stood quietly, hoping someone else would stop this. No one did. The bidding began. Coins changed hands. Men raised their voices as if they were buying a horse. Jeremiah watched the young woman carefully. She never begged. She never cried. She only stood proudly, refusing to let them break her spirit. That was enough. He slowly raised his hand. The auctioneer called out his price. Another man tried to outbid him. Jeremiah calmly offered a much higher amount. The yard suddenly became quiet. No one wanted to spend that much money. The auctioneer slammed his hammer onto the table. "Sold!" A clerk hurried over and placed a paper into Jeremiah's hand. "This proves she belongs to you now." Jeremiah looked at the paper for only a second. Then, without saying a word, he tore it into 2 pieces. The paper floated into the dirt. The entire yard fell silent. Everyone stared at him. Jeremiah looked at the young woman. "You are coming with me." His voice was calm. He never reached for her arm. He never touched her. He simply stepped aside, leaving the road open for her to choose. The woman looked at him carefully, She searched his face. His eyes held no hunger, no pride, no excitement. Only quiet determination. Sheriff Silas walked closer. His hand rested near his revolver. He looked at Jeremiah, then at the crowd. "Keep it peaceful," he said. Everyone understood. That was not just advice. It was permission. The troublemakers backed away. The young woman slowly stepped down from the platform without accepting anyone's help. She walked beside Jeremiah, not behind him, not in front of him, beside him. The crowd watched them leave. Some men whispered angry words. Others simply stared. Jeremiah ignored every one of them. They reached the horses. He untied the spare mare and handed her the reins. "For the road," he said, offering his old wool coat. She hesitated before taking it. The coat smelled of wood smoke, leather, and fresh air. It covered the torn places in her dress. She climbed onto the mare with the balance of someone who had spent years riding. Jeremiah noticed, but said nothing. They rode away from Cinder Creek without looking back. For nearly a mile, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of hoofbeats broke the silence. The young woman watched everything. The hills, the trees, the empty road. Most of all, she watched Jeremiah. She noticed he never rode too close. He always left enough space for her to turn around if she wanted. She noticed he never looked at her with the same eyes as the men in town. That confused her. Finally, Jeremiah spoke. "There is a stone well halfway to my ranch. We'll stop there." She simply nodded. A little later, they reached the clear stream crossing the road. Jeremiah climbed off his horse. He knelt beside the water. "May I see your wrists?" He kept both hands open so she would know he would not grab her. She studied him for several long seconds. Then she slowly held out her hands. The rope burns looked painful. Jeremiah removed a small tin of healing salve from his pocket. He gently spread the medicine across the wounds. His eyes stayed on her wrists. Never once did they wander anywhere else. She noticed. She also noticed how careful his touch was. When he finished, he placed a small tin into her hand instead of putting it away. "You keep it." She slipped it into the pocket of his coat without speaking. They shared dried meat, bread, and cold water beside the stream. It was the first peaceful meal she had eaten since being captured. As they mounted their horses again, Jeremiah looked toward the empty road. 12 more miles. For the first time that day, the young woman believed she might actually reach tomorrow. The afternoon sun climbed higher as they continued across the open land. The cold wind became softer, and for the first time since leaving town, the silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. After a while, the young woman finally spoke. "Do you live alone?" Jeremiah kept his eyes on the trail. "Yes." "No family?" He shook his head. "My brother died years ago. Since then, it's been only me." She looked at him for a moment before asking another question. "Anyone waiting at your house?" "A dog." She almost smiled. "Just a dog?" "He thinks he owns the ranch." For the first time, the corners of her lips moved slightly. It wasn't a full smile, but it was enough for Jeremiah to notice. After another mile, she asked the question that mattered most. "If I reach your ranch, where will I sleep?" Jeremiah answered immediately. "A spare room." She waited. "The door locks from the inside," he added. "Only you can decide whether to open it." She looked away toward the hills. That small detail meant more than he could know. A few minutes later, another horse appeared behind them. Jeremiah heard the hoofbeats before he turned. A ranch hand from town rode closer with a proud grin on his face. "You paid a lot of money," the man laughed. "Could have bought her cheaper if you'd waited." Jeremiah calmly guided his horse between the rider and the young woman. He didn't raise his voice. "Sheriff said it's over." The ranch hand smirked. "It ain't over." Jeremiah rested one hand near his rifle, but never pulled it. His face remained completely calm. "I said, it's over." The quiet confidence in his voice carried more weight than anger ever could. The rider looked at Jeremiah's eyes for several seconds. Then he looked at the rifle. His smile slowly disappeared. Without another word, he turned his horse around and rode back toward town. Only after the rider disappeared did the young woman let out the breath she had been holding. "If the sheriff hadn't been there," she whispered. Jeremiah nodded. But he was. Neither of them spoke again for several minutes. Finally, she asked another question. "Why did you tear that paper?" Jeremiah looked ahead. "Because nobody should carry a paper that claims another human being." "But everyone saw you pay." "They saw me end the auction." She frowned. "They can't say I belong to you?" "No. If anyone argues, they'll argue in front of the sheriff and the clerk." She thought quietly. His answer wasn't emotional. It was practical. And somehow, that made her trust it even more. The ranch appeared on the horizon just before sunset. A simple wooden house, a leaning barn, a small corral. Smoke rising gently from the chimney. The moment they reached the gate, a large brown dog came running toward them, barking loudly. Jeremiah laughed softly. "There he is." The dog stopped in front of the young woman, sniffed her boots, then wagged his tail as if he had already decided she belonged there. "He approves," Jeremiah said. She looked down at the dog. "So, I'm welcome?" "The dog seems to think so." Jeremiah opened the gate and allowed her to ride inside first. He closed it carefully behind them. No hurry, no pressure. Inside the house, warm air greeted them. The smell of fresh bread and beans filled the small kitchen. Everything was simple, but clean. Jeremiah pointed toward a room across the hallway. "That's yours." He stayed where he was instead of walking her to it. "You can lock the door." She entered slowly. The room was small. A narrow bed, a folded blanket, a wooden chair, a window looking toward the open fields. She tested the latch. It worked exactly as Jeremiah had promised. When she returned, he had already placed a clean white shirt, fresh bandages, and a basin of warm water on the table. "You can wash first," he said. Then he quietly turned his back and began adding wood to the stove. He never looked toward her. She changed into the clean shirt. For the first time in 2 days, she felt warm. After washing the dust from her face and wrapping her wrists again, she sat at the table. Jeremiah served 2 bowls of hot beans and fresh bread. He filled her plate first, then his own. Neither of them spoke while eating. The silence felt peaceful now. When she finished her first bowl, Jeremiah quietly filled it again. Not because he expected thanks, simply because he noticed she was still hungry. After dinner, she looked around the small house. No hidden rooms, no bottles of whiskey, no strangers. Only one man, one dog, one warm stove. Finally, she asked the question she had been carrying since morning. "What happens tomorrow?" Jeremiah folded his hands on the table. "You decide." She waited. "If you want, I'll take you to the stagecoach." He counted on his fingers. "If you want the sheriff, I'll take you there. If you want the parson, I'll take you there. If you want to stay here 1 day or 3, that is your choice too." She stared at him. "And if I don't work?" "You still eat." "If I leave?" "I'll saddle your horse." "If I never come back?" "I'll wish you a safe road." Tears almost reached her eyes, but she forced them back. No one had spoken to her like that in a very long time. She took a slow breath. "My name," she stopped. "In town, I didn't tell anyone." Jeremiah waited patiently. "My name is Ara." He nodded respectfully. "Ara." He spoke it gently, as if it were something valuable. Then he smiled for the first time. "I'm Jeremiah Stone." She repeated it quietly. Jeremiah. For the first time that day, they knew each other's names. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees. Inside, the fire crackled gently. Before going to bed, Jeremiah stood near the doorway. "I'll be in my room." He pointed down the hallway. "I won't come to your door unless you call my name." Ara looked at him carefully. "In the morning, will you still mean everything you said today?" Jeremiah answered without hesitation. "Yes." There was no grand promise, no dramatic speech, just one honest word. She walked into the small bedroom and looked once through the window at the open road. It was still there. If she wanted to leave, she could. She closed the door halfway, but did not lock it. That choice belonged to her. Jeremiah quietly put another piece of wood into the stove before going to his own room. The dog lay between both doors, watching over the silent house. Outside, the stars slowly filled the wide western sky. Inside, 2 strangers rested under the same roof. One had rescued a life. The other had found something she thought had disappeared forever. Not love, not yet. Something even more important. The freedom to choose her own tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way till the end. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. It really helps us a lot. If you want to watch more exciting stories like this, don't forget to subscribe our page right now. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is right now? And if this story touched your heart, please send some stars. Every single star gives us huge motivation to keep creating more amazing videos for you. See you in the next story. Take care of you, friends.